Just 20 years ago, low incomes and government restrictions meant that very few Chinese people were able to travel abroad. Now, nearly 1 in 10 tourists in the world comes from China, and between them, they spend more than any other nationality. So what's driving this rapid rise, and how are companies as well, able to cash in? Well, to find out, our chief business correspondent, Linda Yu, has been to the island of Hainan.
Enjoying the sun, braving the crowds. The Hawaii of China has benefited from the growing middle class. Hainan's beaches are teeming with tourists. Can it last?
They've been everywhere domestically, so new places like Dubai are very popular. They've already been to Hong Kong, Macau, Japan and Korea, so they are interested in new destinations. People from Hainan want to travel internationally.
And they have. Nearly 100 million overseas trips were taken by Chinese tourists last year. By 2020, the number of trips is also expected to nearly double to 200 million per year. They spent more than any other travelers, about $100 billion. And this figure is expected to triple.
This explosive growth in tourism has happened quickly. 20 years ago, this kind of place would be where you would find Chinese tourists. And that's because the government tightly controlled the movement of its people overseas. But now, it's all changed.
That means that other countries and their businesses are keen to compete with China to cash in on the tourist dollars.
We launched 3 years ago a program called Hilton Wanying, which is welcome in Chinese. And that's really tailoring our products and our services to make it a welcoming experience. It means having somebody that speaks Chinese at the front desk. It means the collateral materials in the rooms are in Chinese. It means there are tea kettles and slippers.
A Chinese love story retold in a Broadway style. This is China's attempt to appeal to travelers. But will the fairy tale ending be enough to keep the audience coming back for more? Linda Yu, BBC News, Hainan.
Well, we're starting to come into peak tourism season here in the UK, and you can really see the Chinese tourists on the streets of London as you walk about. Let's talk now to Gary Grieve, who is the Managing Director of Capella China, a company that trains tourism service providers here in the UK to cater for the Chinese market. Also in our studio in Beijing is Chen Xu, a researcher from the China Tourism Agency. Thank you both very much for joining us. So, Gary, busy times for you at the moment.
Indeed, yes, very busy, yes. The whole thing has taken off in quite impressive style over the last 12 months or so, as the numbers of Chinese have just grown exponentially, and everybody's waking up and going, we want a bit of that, we need to do something about this.
What in particular do you teach people? How do you train them?
Well, the first thing that we need to train them is that there's no such thing as the Chinese market. The Chinese market is growing so rapidly that it's fragmenting. There are different groups developing that respond and react in different ways. There are the traditional tour groups on a whistle-stop tour of the UK. There are independent travellers who are doing their own thing, a bit more sophisticated, who've come back for the second or third time. Business travellers and students as well, who also act like tourists while they're here, although it's for a longer period. So that's the first thing. So you need to identify your customer and then figure out how to deal with them.
Okay, Chen Xu in Beijing. How do Chinese tourists make a decision about where they want to go?
Well, that depends on the type of the tourist, especially now, just like Gary just said, there are a lot of DIY tourists. The more tech-savvy, they usually do their online search by themselves and look for the hotels and transportations. So, and especially in the outbound market, we can see a lot of the young people are really increasing. And I think that probably related very high-tech stuff in their searching behaviors.
So we're seeing more and more independent travelers as well, and people wanting to go to more obscure places.
Yes, last year, we have over 76% of the outbound travelers are individual travelers, and only packages is less than 30%. So that really shows something.
Gary, if you go into a business here which is expecting a big influx of Chinese tourists, do you tell them to expect a different type of behaviour, or that they need to change the way that they treat a Chinese tourist compared to, say, someone from somewhere else in the world?
Yes, absolutely. This is the reason that there is a need for this kind of cultural training, is that the Chinese kind of act and interact differently in some ways from everybody else, and I think it's probably...
So in what kind of ways? Give us an example.
Okay, so their buying behaviour, for example. So one of the major things that they want to do while they're here is shop, is buy stuff. If it's quite common with tour groups, there's a kind of community effect amongst them, that they like to do the same thing as each other. They'll go into a shop, one person will buy some kind of product, some kind of souvenir, and very often then another 10 or 20 people will buy exactly the same thing. So that impacts on what range. You know, you need to have a narrower range and more stock to deal with that.
Okay, so that's a crucial point. Chen Shu, what about the issue of visas? Does it mean that somewhere like France is a bit more appealing for a Chinese tourist because you can travel in other parts of the Shenzhen visa system as opposed to the UK, where you have to get an individual visa? Does that make a difference?
Yes, it does. Requiring an individual visa for the UK really decreased a lot of tourists into the UK market. We do the survey for every month for the Chinese outbound travelers, and we really see that the visa problem is a big concern for the most travelers, that they complain the most part during the application process. So we really would hope that more countries would facilitate a much easier visa application process to give more to boost the Chinese travel market for their own destinations.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much for joining us. I have to cut this a little bit short because we're going to take everybody to President Obama, who is giving a press conference right now in Brussels.